Today we're going to be talking to the amazingly brave and wonderful guest, and we're going to call her Anna for privacy and safety reasons. We have someone else reading Anna's words. Anna has come to speak to us about an event that happened between her and her abusive ex. This is one of our two-part episodes. The first part contains graphic details about the abuse that some listeners might find disturbing or triggering. If you feel you might be triggered by part one, but want to hear some of the useful tips of how Anna survived the abuse and is now doing, go straight ahead and listen to part two. But if you're okay with listening to some details, here's Anna's story. Welcome to the Secrets in the Powder Room, where we share stories and open up conversations about all the secrets women are forced to keep out of fear and shame. I'm Louise Bryant, professional certified coach, intuitive eating counsellor and trauma-informed domestic abuse specialist and survivor. I'm here to support you on your healing journey and help you feel like you're not alone. This is not to be a replacement of your own professional, medical or legal advice. This podcast contains adult language and content. Listener discretion is advised. Hello, Anna.
Hello, Louise.
How are you doing today?
Yeah, I'm not bad. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very well, thank you. Thank you so much for your bravery in coming on the podcast.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me.
I just want to acknowledge that this is a very, very brave thing for you to do. You know, starting this podcast and sharing my story was one of the hardest things that I've done ever. And, you know, I want you to be the first guest to come here and share your story. And I know it's just one example of one of the situation that you was in. So having a guest obviously is going to be reading your story for us. But in this interview, I'm actually talking to Anna, and I just want you to know that we are protecting you, we're protecting your name, we're protecting your voice, but I want you to be the person that encourages other people to come forward and know that they can share their stories, or they could even read someone else's story. And it gets the message out there. It gets people listening, it gets people knowing that they're not alone, and it gets people having an understanding of what goes on behind closed doors with an abusive relationship. So once again, thank you so much for your bravery and thank you for coming to join us today. So, what secrets have you been keeping out of fear or shame?
I've been living in an abusive relationship for years. We had a baby together, and at the time of this event, the baby was 8 months old. I wasn't allowed to go out with friends, but I started a new job and had the Christmas work to do. It would have looked bad for him if I hadn't gone to that, so he reluctantly allowed me to go. On the evening of the work do, we were all going straight from work. He had to pick up the baby from his mum, as she'd been looking after the baby while we were both at work. She had rang me and told me that he was very drunk when picking up the baby. He started to text and call me, telling me that he was very drunk and how could I leave him with the baby when he was smashed. He constantly called and texted while I was getting ready to go out and in the early stages of our evening. But at 9 o'clock, the phone call stopped. I knew that our baby would be asleep by now and I assumed that he'd fallen asleep too, so I continued with my evening and finally started to have a good time. At the end of the evening, around 1 a.m, my boss took me home in a cab. She dropped me off and I went in. When I got into the house, he was fuming. The electricity had run out and I had the key on me, as I had topped it up that day. He had run out of battery on his phone and couldn't charge it up, and that's why he stopped calling and texting. He started screaming and shouting at me, grabbed my head and banged it against the wall. He stuck his tongue up my nose and said, "You've been taking cocaine, you fucking slag. I knew you'd be taking cocaine with your slaggy mates. I'll go and get me some, you fucking whore." I said I can't, I've had too much to drink. I was crying and very scared. He shouted, "I don't care, get me some now." He was screaming and shouting over me as I was laying on the bed with my baby. He even threw a foot spar at me while our child lay next to me. I did what I was told and I went and got some cocaine and a bottle of vodka from the all-night off licence. I was so scared while driving in case I got caught or hurt somebody. When I got back, he made me take it with him, and he made me have sex with him all night, even though I was crying and begging him to let me sleep, as I needed to get up with the baby. In the morning, when we'd had no sleep, he went to bed and I got up with the baby. After a while, he started to scream and shout at me again from the bedroom that was just next door to the living room. He was screaming at the top of his voice, "You fucking slag." It was going on for ages, and I tried to leave and he'd scream, "Don't you dare fucking leave, you fucking whore." I didn't know what else to do. I was so scared. I called his mum and she came round and sat with me. He was still screaming out, "She's a fucking whore. Go on, tell her you're a druggy cunt. Tell her what you've done." And this carried on for a while. Even after this, his mum still said we're as bad as one another. This carried on until he finally fell asleep. When he woke up, he said he didn't remember any of it, that it didn't happen, and then he took me out for dinner. This was a regular cycle that would happen, but not always starting with me going out. It usually started with him going out and coming home and demanding I get him drugs and have unwanted sex all night long.
Wow, Anna, thank you so much for sharing that story with us. It's very brave of you to have to relive that and share what happened to you in that time. Domestic abuse is such a very serious issue that affects so many women. And having you share that story, I bet there's loads of women out there who can relate to that, and having done maybe not exactly the same, because everyone's story is so different, but can relate to some of the things that you spoke about and have done similar or, same, sort of things that you've just told in your story there. And I want to say that I'm so grateful that you came to share, and I hope that you found some comfort in sharing that and, telling your story. Because, if we tell our stories, it's then in that point that we get to rewrite the ending or write the ending and finish the story of how we want it to be, because once you own your story, you get to decide how that story ends. Thank you for listening to that short episode of Anna's story. And remember, go and listen to part 2, where you can hear how she learnt to survive and thrive and how she's getting on now. If you feel upset or triggered by Anna's story, you could listen to my podcast number 4, Self-Care is Non-Negotiable, or download one of my meditations. Equally, if you've been affected by domestic abuse, you can call the National Domestic Abuse Helpline or your local domestic abuse charity. And if you're in immediate danger, call 999.